Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading White Fang by Jack London. Without further ado, returning to White Fang as read by Lord Naren White. It was this last that especially affected him. The elevation of frames of poles caught his eye. Yet this in itself was not so remarkable, being done by the same creatures that flung sticks and stones to great distances. But when the frames of poles were made into teepees by being covered with cloths and skins, White Fang was astounded. It was the colossal bulk of them that impressed him. They arose around again on every side, like some monstrous quick-growing form of life. They occupied nearly the whole circumference of his field of vision. He was afraid of them. They loomed ominously above him, and when the breeze stirred them into huge movements, he cowered down in fear, keeping his eyes warily upon them, and preparing to spring away, as if they attempted to precipitate themselves upon him. But in a short while his fear of the teepees passed away. He saw the women and children passing in and out of them without harm, and he saw the dogs trying often to get into them, and being driven away with sharp words and flying stones. After a time, he left Kiche's side, and crawled cautiously toward the wall of the nearest teepee. It was the curiosity of growth that urged him on, the necessity of learning and living and doing that brings experience. The last few inches to the wall of the teepee were crawled with painful slowness and precaution. The day's events had prepared him for the unknown to manifest itself in most stupendous and unthinkable ways. At last his nose touched the canvas. He waited. Nothing happened. Then he smelled the strange fabric, saturated with the man's smell. He closed on the canvas with his teeth and gave a gentle tug. Nothing happened, though the adjacent portions of the teepee moved. He tugged harder. There was a greater movement. It was delightful. He tugged still harder, and repeatedly until the whole teepee was in motion. Then the sharp cry of a squaw inside sent him scampering back to Quiche. But after that he was afraid no more of the looming bulks of the teepees. A moment later he was straying away again from his mother. Her stick was tied to a peg in the ground, and she could not follow him. A part-grown puppy, somewhat larger and older than he, came toward him slowly, with ostentatious and belligerent importance. The puppy's name, as White Fang was afterward to hear him called, was Lip Lip. He had had experience in puppy fights, and was already something of a bully. Lip Lip was White Fang's own kind, and, being only a puppy, did not seem dangerous, so White Fang prepared to meet him in a friendly spirit. But when the stranger's walk became stiff-legged, and his lips lifted clear of his teeth, White Fang stiffened too, and answered with lifted lips. They half circled about each other, tentatively, snarling and bristling. This lasted several minutes, and White Fang was beginning to enjoy it as a sort of game. But suddenly, with remarkable swiftness, Lip Lip leaped in, delivering a slashing snap, and leaped away again. The snap had taken effect on the shoulder that had been hurt by the lynx, and that was still sore deep down near the bone. The surprise and hurt of it brought a yelp out of White Fang, but the next moment, in a rush of anger, he was upon Lip Lip and snapping viciously. But Lip Lip had lived his life in camp, and had fought many puppy fights. 3 times, 4 times, and half a dozen times. His sharp little teeth scored on the newcomer until White Fang, yelping shamelessly, fled to the protection of his mother. It was the first of the many fights he was to have with Lip Lip, for they were enemies from the start, born so, with nature's destine perpetually to crash. Quiche licked White Fang soothingly with her tongue, and tried to prevail upon him to remain with her. But his curiosity was rampant, and several minutes later he was venturing forth on a new quest. He came upon one of the man animals, Grey Beaver, who was squatting on his hams and doing something with sticks and dry moss spread before him on the ground. White Fang came near to him and watched. Grey Beaver made noises with which White Fang interpreted as not hostile, so he came still nearer. Women and children were carrying more sticks and branches to Grey Beaver. It was evidently an affair of moment. White Fang came in until he touched Grey Beaver's knee, so curious was he, and already forgetful that this was a terrible man animal. Suddenly he saw a strange thing like the mist beginning to arise from the sticks and moss beneath Grey Beaver's hands. Then amongst the sticks themselves appeared a live thing, twisting and turning, of a color, like the color of the sun in the sky. White Fang knew nothing about fire. It drew him as the light in the mouth of the cave had drawn him in his early puppyhood. He crawled the several steps toward the flame. He heard a Grey Beaver chuckle above him, and he knew the sound was not hostile. Then his nose touched the flame, and at the same instant his little tongue went out to it. For a moment he was paralyzed. The unknown, lurking in the midst of the sticks and moss, was savagely clutching him by the nose. He scrambled backward, bursting out in an astonished explosion of ki-yees. At the sound, Quiche leaped snarling to the end of her stick, and there raged terribly, because she could not come to his aid. But Grey Beaver laughed loudly, and slapped his thighs, and told the happening to all the rest of the camp, till everybody was laughing uproariously. But White Fang sat on his haunches and ki-yeed, a forlorn and pitiable little figure in the midst of the man animals. It was the worst hurt he had ever known. Both nose and tongue had been scorched by the live thing, sun-colored, that had grown up under Grey Beaver's hands. He cried and cried interminably, and every fresh wail was greeted by bursts of laughter on the part of the man animals. He tried to soothe his nose with his tongue, but the tongue was burnt too. And the two hurts, coming together, produced greater hurt, whereupon he cried more hopelessly and helplessly than ever. And then shame came to him. He knew laughter and the meaning of it. It is not given to us to know how some animals know laughter, and know when they are being laughed at, but it was this same way that White Fang knew it, and he felt shame that the man animal should be laughing at him. He turned and fled away, not from the hurt of the fire, but from the laughter that sank even deeper, and hurt in the spirit of him. And he fled to Quiche, raging at the end of her stick like an animal gone mad, to Quiche, the one creature in the world who was not laughing at him. Twilight drew down and night came on, and White Fang lay by his mother's side. His nose and tongue still hurt, but he was perplexed by a greater trouble. He was homesick. He felt a vacancy in him, a need for the hush and quietude of the stream and the cave in the cliff. Life had become too populous. There were so many of the manimals, men, women, and children, all making noises and irritations. And there were the dogs, ever squabbling and bickering, bursting into uproars and creating confusions. The restful loneliness of the only life he had known was gone. Here the very air was palpitant with life. It hummed and buzzed unceasingly, continually changing its intensity, and abruptly variant in pitch. It impinged on his nerves and senses, made him nervous and restless, and worried him with the perpetual imminence of happening. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.